The wind howled across the plains of Erebus, carrying with it the metallic tang of ionized air and the ever-present threat of the coming storms. Captain Elias Voss stood at the edge of the colony's main landing pad, his boots sinking slightly into the rain-slicked permacrete. Behind him, the human settlement sprawled, a patchwork of domes and modular structures, their surfaces scarred by months of relentless weather, but still standing. A shadow fell across the colony as the sleek silver hull of the Zephyrian cruiser Celestial Accord blotted out the dim sunlight. The ship descended with the quiet hum of anti-grav engines, its polished surface reflecting the colony's ramshackle appearance. Like a mocking mirror, Lieutenant Mara Chen stepped up beside Voss, her arms crossed. "They're early," she muttered. Voss didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the ship as its ramp lowered with a hiss of pressurized hydraulics. Magistrate Scherthak emerged, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the colony's floodlights. His forearms moved with practiced grace, adjusting the ceremonial sash draped across his thorax. Behind him, a retinue of Vorak engineers followed, their segmented limbs clicking against the ramp as they descended. "Captain Voss," Scherthak said, his voice smooth and dripping with condescension. "How quaint your settlement looks from orbit. I must admit, I expected something more permanent." Voss forced a neutral expression. "Welcome to Erebus, Fey Magistrate. Our shelters are temporary, but they serve their purpose." Scherthak's mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. Temporary solutions have no place in the Federation's vision. The Council expects stability, not improvisation. He gestured vaguely at the nearest dome, its surface patched with salvaged plating. One of the Vorak engineers, a hulking figure with scarred carapace, snorted. "Primitive," he muttered in guttural standard. No wonder they were assigned this rock. Chen's jaw tightened, but Voss shot her a warning glance. "Shall we begin the inspection?" Scherthak asked, already striding forward without waiting for an answer. Voss fell into step beside him, leading the delegation toward the colony's heart. The human structures were a stark contrast to the rigid geometric designs favored by the Federation's core species. Where the Vorak built towering arcologies of unyielding alloy, the human domes were low, rounded, their surfaces layered with flexible plating that shifted slightly in the wind. Scherthak paused outside a storage module, his upper arms clasped behind his back. "This is your primary habitation, for now," Voss said. "The domes are modular. We expand as needed." The magistrate made a soft clicking sound, the Zephyrian equivalent of a sigh. "Captain, surely you understand the Federation's concerns. Temporary shelters imply impermanence. Instability. The Council cannot approve further colonization rights if this is the standard." One of the Vorak engineers, a sharp-faced individual with scanner implants flickering over his eyes, tapped a claw against the dome's outer shell. "This material is substandard. A single hypercyclone would peel it apart." Chen smirked. "Tell that to the last 3 storms." The Vorak's ocular implants narrowed. "Luck is not a structural reinforcement." Scherthak waved a dismissive hand. "Enough, Captain. I will be frank. Your colony is a disappointment. The Federation expected more from a species with your reputation." Voss kept his voice level. "And what reputation is that?" The magistrate's antennae twitched. "Oh, come now. The stories of human resilience are charming. But this," he gestured at the patched domes, the jury-rigged power relays. "This is not resilience. This is desperation." For the first time, Voss allowed a hint of steel into his tone. "Magistrate, we've been here 6 months. In that time, we've survived atmospheric discharges that would fry your arcologies, temperature swings that crack reinforced alloy, and winds strong enough to lift a Vorak transport. Our temporary shelters are still standing. That's not luck, that's design." Scherthak studied him for a long moment, then turned away. "We shall see, The hypercyclone season begins soon, does it not? Voss didn't answer. The magistrate continued, his voice dripping with faux concern. Perhaps, when your shelters fail, you will understand why the Federation values permanence. Chen's fingers twitched toward the sidearm at her hip, but Voss shook his head minutely. Enjoy your inspection, magistrate, Voss said. Let me know if you'd like a demonstration of how temporary holds up. Sherthak's mandibles parted in what might have been a smile. Oh, I believe we'll have that demonstration very soon. As the delegation moved off, Chen leaned in. They're not even trying to hide it. They want us to fail. Voss watched the aliens disappear into the colony, their polished forms stark against the weathered human structures. Let them think what they want. Storms come and go. We adapt. Above them, the sky darkened. The first distant rumble of thunder rolled across the plains. The wind picked up first, a low, distant howl that made the loose cabling between human domes hum like plucked strings. Dr. Lian Zhao tightened the straps of her environmental suit as she watched the horizon darken. Her fingers danced across the weather console, pulling up projections that flashed red warnings across the screen. Hypercyclone formation in Sector 7, she muttered into her comm. Estimated impact in 12 minutes. Across the compound, Vorak Surveyor Krell adjusted his atmospheric stabilizer with a dismissive flick of his clawed hand. His armored exoskeleton gleamed under Erebus, fist sickly grey light. The polished plates a stark contrast to the patched, together human domes. Your primitive sensors are overreacting, Krell said, mandibles clicking in amusement. The Federation's arcologies are rated for Category 12 atmospheric disturbances. This, he gestured at the gathering storm. A mild breeze. Zhao didn't look up from her console. Your arcologies are rated for standard hypercyclones. Erebus. Faye doesn't follow standards. Krell snorted. A wet, guttural sound. Typical human paranoia. You build like scavengers because you lack the discipline for true engineering. A sharp gust slammed into the compound, rattling the loose plating on the Vorak outpost. Krell's antennae twitched, but he didn't move. Captain Voss' voice crackled over the comm. Zhao, status. Storms coming in faster than projected, she replied. 8 minutes, maybe less. Voss didn't hesitate. Lock it down. Full dispersal protocols. Around them, human colonists moved with practiced efficiency. Reinforced shutters slid over dome windows. Kinetic stabilizers flared to life with a deep, resonant hum. And the flexible alloy frames of the shelters tightened, like muscles bracing for impact. Krell watched, unimpressed. You waste energy on theatrics. A proper structure doesn't need constant adjustment. Zhao finally turned to face him. A proper structure doesn't exist here. Erebus, Faye changes. If you don't change with it, you break. The first lightning strike hit 0.5 kilometer out, splitting the sky with a deafening crack. The ground trembled. Krell's comm buzzed, a frantic message from his own team. Surveyor, the eastern stabilizers are. The transmission cut off as another gust hammered the compound. This time, the Vorak outpost groaned, its rigid frame shuddering under the strain. A support beam near the entrance buckled, the metal screaming as it bent. Zhao didn't wait. She grabbed Krell's arm, yanking him toward the nearest human dome. Move, he resisted, claws digging into the ground. I am not abandoning Federation property to. A section of the outpost's roof tore free, spinning into the storm like discarded scrap. Krell froze. Zhao didn't give him a choice. She hauled him forward as the wind howled around them, debris pelting their suits. The human dome's entrance hissed open, just as the full force of the storm hit. Inside, the air was alive with activity. Colonists monitored flickering displays, adjusting stabilizers in real time as the dome's outer skin flexed under the storm's assault. The walls breathed, expanding and contracting to dissipate the kinetic energy. Krell stared, his antennae rigid with shock. This This is impossible. Zhao wiped mud from her visor. No, it's temporary. Another impact shook the dome, but the structure held, its adaptive frame redistributing the force. Across the compound, the Vorak outpost wasn't so lucky. A central spire snapped like a twig, crashing into the mud as the storm ripped it apart. Krell's comm buzzed again. Panicked voices, orders shouted over the wind. He didn't answer. Zhao leaned in, raising her voice over the storm's roar. You built against the wind, we built with it. Outside, the human domes stood firm, their surfaces alive with motion. The Vorak arcology collapsed, piece by piece, its rigid defiance no match for Erebus, fear's fury. Krell's mandibles worked silently for the first time. He had nothing to say. The wind screamed like a living thing, tearing at the colony with claws of ionized air. Magistrate Sherthak's polished carapace rattled as the first hypercyclone hammered the plateau. His 4 eyes darted between the shuddering human domes and the Vorak arcology's gleaming spire. Impossible, Sherthak hissed, his voice barely audible over the storm. His mandibles twitched in a nervous rhythm. Our structures are rated for Category 12 atmospheric disturbances. Captain Elias Voss didn't bother shouting back. He stood like a statue in the maelstrom, his boots magnetized to the buckling walkway. His eyes never left the Vorak spire. Lieutenant Mara Chen's voice crackled through his earpiece, spires oscillating at Fei hertz. Captain, their stabilizers can't compensate. A sound like the sky splitting open drowned her out. The Vorak arcology's central support beam twisted like a dying thing, its polished alloy screaming as it warped. For a heartbeat, the entire structure leaned. Then the top third sheared clean off, crashing into the mud below in a shower of sparking debris. Sherthak's entourage scattered, their exoskeletons flashing panic colors. The magistrate himself stumbled, one clawed hand grasping at Voss' arm. You must evacuate us your shuttles. Voss peeled the alien's grip off his sleeve. Shuttles can't fly in this. He turned toward the nearest human dome, its surface rippling like liquid metal under the storm's assault. But our shelters can take it. You expect us to hide in those fabrications? Sherthak's voice cracked. Chen's laughter hissed through the comms. Better than dying in your permanent solution, magistrate. Another impact shook the ground. The Vorak arcology's eastern wing collapsed inward, its rigid geometry folding like paper. Voss watched dispassionately as a team of Zephyrian engineers scrambled for cover, their prized environmental suits sparking where debris struck. Decision time, Voss said. He didn't offer his hand. Sherthak's throat pouch inflated, a Zephyrian sign of absolute distress. Behind him, one of his aides was screaming something about structural integrity percentages. The numbers didn't matter anymore. The human dome nearest them pulsed suddenly, its surface reconfiguring in a wave of hexagonal plates. What had been a smooth curve now bristled with angled deflectors, each one aligning perfectly to redirect the screaming winds. You called them temporary, Voss said. He started walking toward the dome, not checking if the aliens followed. Watch what temporary can do. The entrance irised open at his approach, revealing an interior lit by the cool blue of kinetic dispersal fields. Human colonists moved with practiced efficiency, securing equipment and monitoring flickering holographic displays. None of them panicked. Sherthak hesitated at the threshold, his compound eyes reflecting the storm's fury. This is not possible. Your technology profile indicated outdated, Chen said from inside. She stood beside a bank of monitors, her fingers dancing across a holographic keyboard, by about 3 generations. Another deafening crash shook the ground. Through the dome's transparent upper sections, they watched the Vorak arcology's main power core explode in a fountain of blue fire. The shockwave hit the human dome, and the entire structure flexed, its outer layer absorbing the energy like a living thing. Dr. Lian Zhao emerged from a side corridor, her white lab coat fluttering in the dome's artificial breeze. Kinetic redistribution at Fey efficiency, she reported. Nanite matrix holding. Sherthak's aides crowded behind him, their exoskeletons dull with shock. One of them, a young Zepyrian technician, reached out to touch the dome's inner wall. Her claw passed through the surface like it was water, coming away coated in shimmering silver particles. Adaptive nano-alloys, Zhao said, noticing the alien's wonder. Each molecule's programmed to reconfigure under stress. Outside, the storm reached its crescendo. Lightning arced between the remaining Vorak structures, reducing them to molten slag. The human domes stood untouched, their surfaces now alive with crawling patterns of energy dissipation. Chen smirked at Sherthak's expression. You Federation types always build for the storm you expect. We build for the one we don't. Voss crossed to the central console, where a hologram of the colony pulsed with data streams. Activate Phase 2. The dome shuddered, not from the storm, but from within. Deep below their feet, something awakened. The floor plates vibrated as hidden mechanisms engaged. What are you doing? Sherthak demanded. Showing you, Voss said, why temporary doesn't mean weak. The dome's ceiling split open along invisible seams. Modular sections unfolded like the petals of some enormous metal flower, each one locking into a new configuration. Where there had been a single shelter, now stood a tiered defensive bastion, its edges bristling with what looked suspiciously like weapon emplacements. One of the Vorak engineers made a choking sound. Those are plasma cannons. Chen patted the nearest emitter. Multi-purpose nodes. Actually, storm mitigation, comms relay, point defense. She grinned. Depends what buttons I press. Sherthak's mandibles hung slack. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. You designed this? Voss watched the storm rage through the newly formed battlements. No, he said. We grew it. Outside, the last of the Vorak arcology collapsed into the mud. The human structures stood untouched. No, not untouched, stronger. The storm wasn't destroying them, it was making them more. The storm raged outside, its fury shaking the reinforced walls of the command center. Krell clutched a support beam, his four jointed fingers digging into the metal as another gust rattled the structure. Across the room, Mara Chen worked calmly at a holodisplay, her fingers dancing across the interface with practiced ease. You're telling me this was all part of some plan? Krell hissed, his voice barely audible over the howling winds. Chen didn't look up. You really think we'd build something that couldn't handle a little weather? A little weather? Krell's frills flared in disbelief. This storm would tear a Vorak dreadnought apart. Chen finally turned, a smirk playing at the corner of her lips. She tapped a command sequence into the console. The display shifted, revealing a three-dimensional schematic of the colony, but not as it appeared now. Layers upon layers of hidden infrastructure unfolded before Krell's eyes, a fractal web of support, beams, energy conduits, and modular compartments. Krell's breath caught. This isn't possible. Watch. Chen entered another command. The schematic animated, showing the colony's transformation over time. What had started as simple domes now branched outward, underground tunnels spiderwebbing beneath the surface, support struts reinforcing themselves with each passing hour. You see those patches you laughed at? Chen pointed to a section of the schematic. Nano, alloy weave, absorbs kinetic energy and redistributes it through the structure. Every time the wind hits us, we get stronger. Krell's frills quivered. But the materials, your supply logs showed only basic composites. Chen laughed. You think we'd file the real manifests with Federation oversight? Those scrap piles you dismissed are dormant nano factories. Been replicating spare parts since day one. A particularly violent gust shook the command center. Krell stumbled, but Chen remained steady, her boots magnetized to the floor. Alarms blared as the Vorak Arcology's distress signals flooded the comm channels. Chen ignored them, zooming in on another section of the schematic. See this? She highlighted a series of interconnected chambers beneath the main dome. That is not storage, that is a foundry. And this, she switched views, revealing a network of concealed turrets along the perimeter, is why we didn't panic when your fleet entered the system. Krell's mandibles clicked in agitation. You deceived the entire Federation. No, Chen corrected. We followed regulations. You just assumed temporary meant flimsy. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. You know what the first rule of human engineering is, Krell? The Vorak scientist said nothing. His eyes locked on the schematics. Chen grinned. Always have a backup plan. Outside, another section of the Vorak Arcology collapsed, its rigid structure unable to flex with the storm's fury. The human domes, meanwhile, pulsed with energy, their surfaces rippling like liquid metal as they adapted to the changing winds. Deep beneath their feet, something else stirred. A low hum of awakening machinery, the colony's hidden heart beginning to beat. Krell swallowed hard. What else are you hiding? Chen's smile didn't reach her eyes. Wouldn't you like to know? The console beeped, an alert flashing red. Chen turned back to it, her fingers flying across the interface. Ah, right on schedule. What is? Krell demanded. Chen didn't answer. Instead, she opened a comm channel. Voss, Phase 2 is live. They're ready. A pause, then the captain's voice crackled through the speakers. About damn time. The ground trembled, not from the storm, but from something deeper, something awakening. Krell's frills stood straight up as the realization hit him. This wasn't a shelter. It was a weapon. The winds howled like a dying beast, but the human shelters held. Magistrate Sherthak's mandibles trembled as he watched the Vorak Arcology collapse into the mud, its rigid spires snapping like brittle bone. His shuttle lay in ruins, crushed under debris. He turned to Voss, his compound eyes wide with panic. You knew this would happen, Sherthak hissed. Voss didn't answer. He tapped his wristcom, and the colony erupted into motion. The domes shuddered, then unfolded. What had been flimsy shelters moments earlier now expanded, their modular frames locking into place with metallic clicks. Nano-alloy plating slid into position, reinforcing the structures as they morphed into something else entirely. Storage sheds split open, revealing concealed turrets that hummed to life. The patchwork walls of the mess hall reconfigured into a command bunker, its surface hardening under the storm's assault. Sherthak staggered back. This is impossible. Lieutenant Mara Chen smirked as she adjusted the targeting array on her wrist display. You kept calling them temporary. We never said they were weak. A deep tremor shook the ground as the central dome's roof split apart, revealing a spire of gleaming metal. It wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was a beacon, a declaration. Voss turned to the magistrate, his voice cutting through the storm. You wanted to see our permanent solution. Watch. The sky above rippled. A Vorak punitive fleet emerged from the clouds, their warships sleek and predatory. They had come expecting ruins, a broken colony begging for mercy. Instead, they found a fortress. The lead ship, the Talon's Wrath, hovered ominously, its commander, High Blade Kesk, snarled over the comms. Pathetic humans, did you think your Scrap-Heap would save you? Voss didn't flinch. He raised a hand. The colony answered. Hidden panels slid open across the settlement, railgun emplacements, disguised as water tanks, locked onto the fleet. The storage sheds Mara had mentioned unfolded into missile batteries, their targeting arrays blinking to life. The ground itself seemed to shift as subterranean launch. Silos disgorged a swarm of drones, their engines screaming into the storm. Kesk's laughter died in his throat. The first railgun round struck the Talon's Wrath dead center. The ship's shields flared, then shattered. The second shot punched through its hull, sending debris raining down. Chaos erupted. The Vorak fleet scrambled, their formation breaking as human artillery found its mark. One ship veered too close to the storm's edge. The winds caught it, spinning it into a fatal collision with its sister vessel. Shurthak watched in horror as the temporary colony unleashed hell. You deceived us," he spat. Voss turned, his eyes cold. "No, you just assumed." Mara's voice crackled over the comms. "All systems green, Captain. Adaptive grid holding, they're not getting through." Another Vorak ship exploded, its engines overloading under concentrated fire. The remaining vessels broke formation, retreating into the storm's fury. Kesk's final transmission was a snarl of disbelief. "This isn't over." "Human." Voss didn't bother replying. He looked at Shurthak instead. "You thought permanent meant unbreakable," he said. "But nothing's unbreakable. Not your arcologies, not your fleets. The only thing that survives is what adapts." The magistrate's mandibles clicked uselessly. He had no answer. Around them, the colony continued to shift. The domes sealed themselves, their surfaces smoothing into seamless armor. The turrets retracted, vanishing back into their hidden compartments. By the time the storm passed, it would look like a settlement again, just as it had before. But now everyone knew the truth. Mara walked up, wiping grease from her hands. "Orders, Captain." Voss watched the last Vorak ship vanish into the clouds. "Prep the expansion protocols if they're coming back. Well, be ready." Shurthak finally found his voice. You planned this from the beginning." Voss almost smiled. "No, we just built for it." The wind howled, but the colony stood firm. Not a fortress, not a shelter, something more. The storm's fury finally began to wane, its howling winds reduced to a weary moan as the last tendrils of black clouds retreated across Erebus. Phase bruised sky. Krell stood in the mud, his once pristine surveyor's robes now tattered and streaked with grime. His four eyes blinked unevenly as he took in the transformed human colony, no longer a collection of ramshackle domes, but a sprawling network of interlocking bastions, their surfaces still humming with residual energy from the nano-alloy reconfiguration. Nearby, Dr. Lian Zhao adjusted her cracked goggles, her fingers tracing the readouts on her wrist display. Structural integrity at Fei, she announced to no one in particular. Kinetic dispersal fields held, fractal reinforcement complete. Krell's mandibles twitched, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "How?" Zhao turned, her face streaked with sweat and storm grime. "How what?" "Your shelters." Krell gestured weakly at the colony, his primary arms trembling. "They were supposed to collapse. The Federation's atmospheric models predicted catastrophic failure for any structure not rated for Class Fei hypercyclones." Zhao finished for him, wiping her hands on her pants. "Yeah, we know. That is why we didn't build to your specs." Krell's dorsal spines flattened in confusion. Around them, human engineers moved with purpose, checking seams and reinforcing joints. The colony wasn't just intact, it was larger now, its modular sections having unfolded and interlocked like some vast mechanical organism responding to threat. "You built them wrong on purpose," Krell realized aloud. Zhao smirked. "We built them human." She tapped her display, pulling up a holographic schematic. The image shimmered between them, showing the colony's original form, a seemingly haphazard arrangement of domes and outbuildings. Then the simulation played. As storm winds hit, the structures shifted, their surfaces rippling like liquid metal before locking into new reinforced configurations. Krell's secondary eyes dilated. "This isn't architecture. This is alive. Close enough." Zhao crossed her arms. "You Vorak build your arcologies to last 1,000 years. Solid, unchanging, impressive, right up until the environment throws something new at you. She nodded toward the wreckage of the Vorak outpost, its shattered spires jutting from the mud like broken teeth. We don't have that luxury. Earth's a death world. If we'd tried to build permanent solutions, we'd have gone extinct before we invented the wheel. A group of Zephyrian aides hurried past, their usually immaculate robes mud splattered. Magistrate Sherthak trailed behind them, his antennae drooping. He paused when he saw Zhao and Krell, his compound eyes reflecting the hologram. "You knew," Sherthak accused, his voice hoarse from shouting over the storm. "You knew our models were wrong." Zhao shrugged. "We knew your models were wrong. Ours accounted for the storm's resonance frequency. Your arcologies were too rigid. They vibrated at the wrong harmonic and shattered. Ours flexed, absorbed, adapted." Sherthak's mandibles worked silently for a moment before he managed. "This changes everything." Nearby, Lieutenant Mara Chen emerged from a newly fortified command dome, her tactical visor retracting. She tossed a data crystal to Sherthak, who caught it reflexively. "Transmission logs from the Vorak punitive fleet," she said. "They're holding position at the edge of the system, waiting to see if we survived." Krell made a low, distressed, chittering noise. "They'll attack anyway. The High Command won't tolerate. They'll tolerate what we make them tolerate," Chen interrupted. She nodded toward the colony's perimeter, where human engineers were assembling makeshift artillery emplacements from what had been storage sheds hours earlier. "We didn't just survive the storm, Krell, we weaponized it." Sherthak clutched the data crystal, his antennae twitching. "The Federation will demand your schematics." "This technology isn't technology," Zhao cut in. "It is philosophy. You can't replicate it just by studying alloy compositions. It is in the design, in the way we think." She gestured at the sky where the last storm clouds were dissipating. "Permanence is an illusion. The only constant is change, so we build things that embrace that." Krell stared at his own hands, his claws flexing. "All this time, we thought your shelters were temporary because you lacked the skill to build better." Chen laughed, sharp and humorless. "And we thought your permanent arcologies were monuments to arrogance. Guess we both learned something today." Sherthak turned abruptly, his robes swirling. "I must contact the Federation Council immediately. This redefines everything about human classification." As the magistrate hurried away, Krell remained, his posture uncharacteristically slumped. "Your people," he said slowly. "You've done this before, on other worlds." Zhao exchanged a glance with Chen. "Let's just say Erebus. Faye isn't the first place. Aliens have underestimated human shelters." Chen tapped her wrist display, pulling up a star map. Dozens of markers glowed across Federation space. Every temporary outpost, every makeshift colony. They're all part of the same design, waiting for the right conditions, the right moment. Krell's exoskeleton paled. "You're not just settlers. You're seeding something." Zhao smiled faintly. "Call it an insurance policy." Overhead, the clouds finally broke, revealing Erebus, Faye's pale sun. Its light gleamed off the colony's transformed structures. No longer shelters, but something far more dangerous. Sherthak's voice crackled over the comms, tight with panic. "The punitive fleet. They're moving. They've launched drop pods." Chen didn't look up from her display. "Right on schedule." Krell backed away, his spines flaring. "You wanted this. You provoked them." Zhao adjusted her goggles, her eyes hard. "We didn't provoke anything. We just stopped hiding what we really are." Outside, the first human artillery batteries powered up, their barrels humming to life. Somewhere in the distance, the first drop pod hit the atmosphere, trailing fire like a falling star. The holographic chamber flickered to life, its circular platform projecting the shimmering forms of the Federation High Council. Admiral Jorvak's four eyes narrowed as the footage from Erebus. Faye played human shelters expanding, shifting, hardening into fortifications, before the Vorak fleet's impotent barrage. His mandibles twitched in disbelief. "Impossible," he hissed. "No species builds like this." Captain Elias Voss stood at the center of the chamber, arms crossed, his boots still caked in Erebus, Fee's mud. Around him, the translucent forms of a dozen alien dignitaries leaned forward, their expressions ranging from awe to outright terror. "You're looking at it wrong," Voss said. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. This wasn't construction, it was response. Magistrate Sherthak's image flickered beside Jorvac, his once pristine robes now torn and streaked with dirt. "Admiral, the humans, their technology, has no classification," interrupted a Corellian scientist, her floating orbs darting across data streams. "Their nano-alloys don't match any known material index. The fractal expansion patterns," Voss snorted. "You're still stuck on the how. That's your problem." Jorvac's tail lashed. "Explain." Lieutenant Mara Chen stepped forward, tapping a command into her wrist display. The holograms shifted, showing Earth, not its cities, but its history. Volcanoes, earthquakes, ice ages. "We didn't invent adaptability," she said. "We survived it. Every permanent structure our ancestors built turned to dust, so we learned to build things that change." A Vorak engineer, his exoskeleton still cracked from the storm, snarled. "This is deception. You hid military infrastructure under the guise of shelters." Voss laughed. "No, we just don't see the difference." He gestured, and the hologram zoomed in on a single human dome during the storm, its panels flexing, redistributing force, then locking into a new configuration. Shelter, fortress, factory, same bones, different skin. Silence hung in the chamber. Then Jorvac leaned forward. "The Federation demands these schematics. This technology could..." "Could what?" Voss interrupted. "Save you, protect you." His grin was sharp. "It's not a thing, it's a way. You can't replicate it because it's not tech, it's thought." Sherthak's voice was barely a whisper. "You planned this." Chen shook her head. "We didn't plan to prove anything. You just finally saw what was always there." The Corellian scientist's orbs dimmed. "Then your entire colony was a question," Voss finished. "And you answered it." He stepped toward Jorvac's image. "You wanted permanent solutions, buildings that last forever." His smile vanished. "Nothing lasts, not here, not anywhere. The only thing that matters is how fast you adapt." Jorvac's tail went still. For the first time, something like fear flickered in his eyes. Voss turned to leave. "Wait." The Admiral's voice cracked. "The Federation must... we'll evaluate." Voss didn't look back. "Yeah, you do that." The human colony stood taller now, its structures reshaped, reinforced, scavenged Vorak alloy gleamed in patches across the domes. Dr. Lian Zhao watched as Krell, the Vorak surveyor, limped toward her, his pride as shattered as his exoskeleton. "How?" he rasped. Zhao handed him a wrench. "You build against the wind, it breaks you. You bend, it passes, you learn its rhythm." She nodded to where children were already sketching new designs in the mud. "You dance." Above them, the sky cleared. Somewhere beyond it, the Federation was scrambling, reclassifying, recalculating. Voss didn't care. He stood at the edge of the colony, watching the horizon. Chen joined him. "Think they'll finally get it?" Voss chuckled. "Doubt it." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of ozone and fresh earth somewhere. Another storm was coming, and humanity would be ready.